Where are the remaining 98 hours of Epstein tapes? Wolff says he has 100 or so, maybe more. In that tape, he says, I have 100 of hours of him talking about Trump. So maybe he has even more of him just talking, period. 1 hour and 44 minutes were provided to the Daily Beast. A few minutes, if that, was played on Wolff's podcast. So what gives? Where's the rest of it? Well, we at the Megyn Kelly Show can confirm that more tapes do indeed exist. We know because my team and I have heard some of them. The tapes have not been made public because we have been told they are part of an unknown, unreleased project. Who's doing the project? Who now owns the tapes? I don't know. We do not have a copy of them, nor do we know the plans for them. But we do recall some of what we heard on them. We heard a conversation from April 2019, which is 5 months after Julie K. Brown's explosive reporting on Epstein that really led to the end for him and young women in the Miami Herald. That led to renewed national scrutiny on Jeffrey Epstein. It talked basically it was all about how Epstein had negotiated some 36 women coming forward, young women, 13 to 15, 13 to 16, coming forward against Jeffrey Epstein at the time. And the local PD, she wrote, was doing its job, trying to process all these claims. And then eventually it became so huge, they brought in the feds. This is under the George W. Bush administration. It was 2007 that this first unfolded. Obama didn't, take office till January of 2009. And so this thing was growing back then against Epstein. And that's when Alan Dershowitz came in. He represented Jeffrey Epstein, and he got him the sweetheart deal of the century, where they made all these women go away by not involving them in the plea. They didn't tell the women that they were copying a plea with this guy. They actually told the women that the case was ongoing, which is a violation of their rights and led in part to some of the payouts these women got. It's totally unfair to them. They never had their day in court because of what the feds did with Epstein at that time. They struck a sweetheart plea deal with him where he got to plead guilty to solicitation of prostitution from a minor, which is not a thing. Minors cannot prostitute themselves. That's called statutory rape. So that's what Epstein was going through. That's what they were suggesting. He was blaming on Trump, that Trump somehow dropped a dime on him at the time after this failed real estate deal or this fight they had over either real estate or, seeking girls at Mar-a-Lago. We just don't know. We've had different stories told to us. And he thought Trump was at the root of his legal problems. But now in 2018, Julie K. Brown of the Miami Herald stumbles on the whole thing. She sees this sweetheart deal. He served, like a year and a half on house arrest, 12 hours a day were outside of the prison. He was at his office in this cush environment. He was out of jail 6 out of the 7 days of the week. And so she blew the lid off of this, that this guy, Alex Acosta, who was the U.S. attorney at the time covering this area of Florida, struck this deal with Alan Dershowitz and Epstein's other lawyers. That was the deal of the century. He did have to register as a sex offender. And it allowed him to go on as a predator. That's really what was so controversial about it, among other things, really. And so she breaks this 10 years after he struck the deal, renewing massive amounts of scrutiny on Epstein. Alex Acosta, who by 2018 had become Trump's labor secretary. He wound up having to leave the post after this reporting. And that was, I think, November of 2018. It was July of 2019 that Epstein got charged as a serial prolific sex trafficker, right? So this Julie K. Brown article was explosive and did lead to all this renewed national scrutiny on Epstein. So this is where he's talking on the tape that we heard. It's April of 2019, just a few months after Julie K. Brown's reporting, but 3 months before Epstein would actually be arrested on the new, gravely serious charges of sex trafficking minors. On the tape that we heard, 4 power brokers are in a room. They are brainstorming public relations strategies. The goal, to try to rehabilitate Epstein's image. Epstein's there. Steve Bannon is there, obviously a major player on the right. Michael Wolff is also there. But he is not just a journalistic observer. He is an active participant, providing Epstein with his own PR advice. This tracks with an extraordinary email exchange released yesterday between Wolff and Epstein from 3 years earlier, from a few years prior to this 2019 email that we heard. It is dated December 15th. Is it 2015 or 26? Yeah. Okay. It's December 15th, 2015, and carries over to December 16th, 2015. This in this exchange, Wolff sounds, when he's writing to Epstein, more like a crisis PR rep than he does an independent journalist, which he purports to be, by the way. On December 15th, 2015, Wolff tells Epstein, quote, "I hear CNN is planning to ask Trump tonight about his relationship with you, either on air or in scrum afterward." There was a CNN debate that night. Epstein responds that same day, quote, "If we were able to craft an answer for him, what do you think it should be?" Wolff responds the next day on the 16th, quote, "I think you should let him hang himself. If he says he hasn't been on the plane or to the house, then that gives you a valuable PR and political currency. You can hang him in a way that potentially generates a positive benefit for you. Or if it really looks like he could win, you could save him, generating a debt." CNN did not ask Trump about Epstein at all that night. And in another stunning email, Wolff, in October of 2016, writes to Epstein, quote, "There's an opportunity to come forward this week and talk about Trump," this is right before the election, "in such a way that could garner you great sympathy and help finish him. Interested?" Wolff posted a video on social media yesterday responding to these disclosures from these emails, but he did not address any of the ethical issues about his relationship with Epstein as a so-called journalist. Instead, as you're now seeing in a pattern of events, Michael Wolff went after Donald Trump.
I have been trying to talk about this story for a very long time now. And this is, well, perhaps we're getting close to the smoking gun. Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump had the closest of relationships for more than a decade. It's curious that Epstein's relationship with so many people in public life has damaged them considerably. But the one person who he was closest to has not been held accountable. That's Donald Trump. I released tapes of Epstein talking about this relationship before the election to really little effect. What was Donald Trump's relationship to Jeffrey Epstein? What's the nature of that relationship? What did they do together? And anything, I think, that can bring us closer to an answer to that question is central to our time.
Now, let's be clear. When Michael Wolff released those excerpts that landed with a thud in October, on October 31st and via the Daily Beast, November 2nd, the election was November 5th of 2024, he wanted to sink Trump. That seems clear. Why would he hold back the most damning piece of the tapes? If he has more, if he's got Epstein on tape making it clear Trump trafficked girls, something equally awful, don't you think Michael Wolff would have released that days before the election? So while he says we're getting close to the smoking gun, it seems clear to me he doesn't have it. He doesn't have it. I think it's clear he would have released it. But back to what I do believe he does have. I only know a sliver of it. He knows the rest, and I don't know whether he's ever going to show us on the rest of those tapes. But I want to go back to what we heard and the room with Epstein, Wolff, Bannon, and one other person, a woman. We can at this time exclusively reveal that the fourth party in that room, never before publicly identified, was former Obama White House counsel Kathy Ruemmler. Ms. Ruemmler is all over the emails that just hit yesterday, which show a very friendly relationship between her and Jeffrey Epstein. She reportedly even showed up to Epstein's 2019 sex trafficking arraignment. In Wolff's 2021 book, all right, now try to keep it straight because we're going to tell you about a meeting that was from April 2019. Jeffrey Epstein allegedly killed himself. in August of 2019, 1 month after he'd been charged with all these crimes. And then in 2021, Wolff wrote another book. In 2018, he had written Fast or Fury and Fire, whatever it was, Fire and Fury. And then in 2021, after the meeting that we're discussing with you right now, he wrote another book called Too Famous. And in that book, he revealed parts of this conversation I'm telling you about right now. But interestingly, he holds a few things back. He does not reveal, for example, this attorney's identity. In the audio we heard, she's referred to as White House counsel and Kathy, so it's pretty clear to us who it is. Now that we see her all over the email correspondence, even more so. We reached out to Ms. Ruemmler on our reporting that she was in this meeting with Epstein, and she declined to comment. The tenor of the conversation is friendly and upbeat. It sounds like friends having a good time, laughing and joking as they try to come up with ways to spin a known sex abuser back into the good graces of the public. Now, just it's interesting. Keep in mind, this is after he knows at this point about the Julie K. Brown reporting, and he knows additional legal charges could come his way. That's what's interesting about the timing of this tape that we heard. All right, so it's happening months before he would wind up dead. The discussion in the audio begins with a bizarre and flippant conversation about prostitution and whether the average prostitute is underage or not. Again, reminder, Epstein pleaded guilty in 2008 to solicitation of an underage prostitute. Insert my refrain about how that's an impossibility. He raped a young girl. He didn't solicit a prostitute who was underage. That's not a thing. Bannon then quickly tries to change the topic, expressing his opinion that the core accusations against Epstein, that he is a rapist and a pedophile who is trafficking underage girls to his rich friends, are not true. Bannon says Epstein does not have a legal strategy problem, but that his PR problems are metastasizing. Bannon suggests a year of media training so Epstein could do an interview on a program like 60 Minutes. And both Bannon and Ruemmler express regret that Charlie Rose, who was brought down by a sexual harassment scandal of his own in 2017, was no longer available to do an interview on his show. Yes, he would have been a friendly. They were not wrong about that. Wolff then brings up Gayle King as a possible interviewer. Bannon notes R. Kelly's disastrous interview with her went south because, in his view, R. Kelly didn't prepare. Note to Gayle, it's not a great thing when they're talking about who could we get to do a softball interview, and you are the second one mentioned after only sex pest Charlie Rose. So telling, these windows into these backroom conversations. Wolff documented some of this conversation I'm telling you about, though notably not all, in that book I mentioned called Too Famous, which hit in 2021, revealing that Ruemmler chimed in, he doesn't name her, that she did not want Epstein videotaped in preparation for any interview with a 60 Minutes or whomever, because it could be subject to a subpoena. Listen to this exchange on the audiobook of Too Famous that begins with the attorney we are now identifying as Ruemmler in her argument with Steve Bannon.
I'm not opposed to media training. I just don't want a videotape out there. He's got to sit there and watch the tape all the time. That's how you learn. This is like preparing for a deposition, except this is preparing for the court of public opinion. That's my point. He never had to prepare for a deposition because he just takes the fifth. Now you're setting him up to answer questions he can't answer. And certainly, if he answers them, they're not going to rehabilitate him. She was only 16, but full of tattoos. So 16, but not like a good person who's 16. Really, continued Bannon, there has got to be a way to answer that in an acceptable way. I don't know what the answer is, but you have got to figure out the basic positioning, which should have been done 15 years ago. We're trying to show remorse or whatever we're trying to show. However we get there, we've got to get this to the point on Gayle King so that the big reveal is that he's not a monster. He's human, ashamed, mortified.
Very interesting. Okay, so that's the audio reader depicting an exchange between Bannon and Ruemmler. Notably excluded from Wolff's book is Wolff's own role in this exchange. He's openly advising Epstein again in this conversation on how to minimize his alleged crimes. Epstein does not appear to be taking it seriously at all, asking at one point, "Who's going to play me on Saturday Night Live?" More from the audiobook of Too Famous, depicting here a conversation Wolff says he had with Steve Bannon, comparing the media training to that a professional athlete would get when studying game tape.
There's a process here of getting him on camera and having him study it, like you study NFL films, like Tom Brady. And do you think
That's Bannon.
he can actually do this, even studying? I'm here, by the way, guys. Grandpa's up in the attic.
That's Epstein.
He's still here, said a shrugging Epstein.
Ruemmler ultimately relents and allows Epstein to sit for a practice interview so long as they don't talk about his legal issues. On the tape we heard, but not in Wolff's book, Epstein bizarrely suggests that he should talk about women and science in the practice interview. This is how he thinks he's going to rehabilitate himself. An incredulous Ruemmler accuses Epstein of having said there's never been a great female scientist and that women become morons as soon as they get their first period. An undeterred Epstein says women are the future of science because they will focus on things that cannot be measured like love and intuition. Okay. We can also reveal for the first time that before the practice interview, the group also discusses possibly suing the Miami Herald over its award-winning reporting about Epstein. But Ruemmler expresses concern that Epstein's reputation was already so soiled that he would not be able to recover many damages, and that he would still have to plead the Fifth Amendment in any depositions. Ruemmler then leaves the group to take a call on behalf of another client, and Epstein is heard on the tape telling Ruemmler, "Cute dress." Bannon jokes, "Let me introduce you to Jeffrey Biden," an obvious reference to Jeffrey Epstein's name, and we assume that of Joe Biden, a reference to Biden's inappropriate public behavior toward young women. In the practice session, Bannon plays the role of a 60 Minutes interviewer, and Epstein tries to say he doesn't like to party. Wolff's book, Too Famous, would later recount this conversation with Steve Bannon identified as SB Epstein J.E. in the audiobook.
SB, you're not a playboy. J.E., I am a playboy. SB, how can you be a playboy and not be social? J.E., I didn't say I was a hermit. I don't go out. I meet people in different ways. I go to specialized professional gatherings. SB, is that a euphemism? J.E., where I meet people who I find interesting, or interesting people seek me out and come to my home. SB, are these men or women? J.E., both. But if the question is, do I like women? The answer is yes.
No wonder this interview never actually happened. I mean, some bad things happened to Jeffrey Epstein after that plan, but you can see the frustration of those who were apparently trying to help him, that he might be unhelpable. On the tape, we hear Epstein say that he has a photographic memory with numbers, that he studied at the Lawrence Livermore National Lab in high school, and that he received a perfect score on the math section of his SAT. Despite not having a college degree, he says he got a job as a math teacher at the prestigious private Dalton School in New York City by cold calling and then acing the interview. In the practice interview with Bannon, Epstein says he taught 17 and 18-year-olds and that he would pay extra attention to the girls. The exchange here in the audiobook of Too Famous. Listen.
SB, you would focus on the females versus the males. J.E., yes, to the extent that I had something more to give them. SB, what? J.E., as I said, a friendlier view of the math world. SB, you understand how that might sound creepy. J.E., that I don't know. It doesn't sound creepy to me now, and I don't think it seemed creepy to anyone then. I also tutored young black men.
Epstein's comments about young black students also weren't exactly media friendly. From the audiobook.
They can do great mathematics. They just have to be playing basketball at the same time. Seriously, when blacks learn, one of the nice things about basketball is that they are moving around. Blacks learn really well when they are moving around. And in American schools, you tell blacks to sit in their chairs.
The group then takes a break to give Epstein feedback where Wolff and Bannon compliment him on his charisma and screen presence, but make the observation that his commentary needs some work. Seriously, says Bannon, according to Too Famous. You're engaging, you're not threatening, you're natural, you're friendly, you don't look at all creepy, you're a sympathetic figure, and this is what 75% of the battle is. I'm totally impressed. We just have to cut the content down. On the audio we heard, but not in the book, Wolff enters the conversation again, reminding Epstein that 60 Minutes is going to shoot 2 hours of tape and cut it down to about 6 minutes, and saying Epstein was giving them opportunities to capture moments when he sounds terrible. Also not in the book is Bannon reminding Epstein that the interview is, quote, not a search for truth. While Epstein is in another room, Wolff on the tape expresses how fishy he finds it that Epstein got a job at the Dalton School without a college degree. Quote, I've been going after this for years, Wolff is heard saying. And then Bannon responds, quote, I'm still not buying it. Bannon is laughing at the time. And the American people are not buying the story around Epstein either. Legitimate questions persist about the extent of his crimes and who, if anyone, is being protected. President Trump seems uninterested in further Epstein disclosures. Just this week, he reportedly met with Lauren Boebert, one of the Republicans pushing a so-called discharge petition that, if signed by 218 House members, which has now happened late yesterday, will get a vote on the House floor seeking more disclosure from the DOJ. The vote, however, will be largely symbolic, as it would likely be DOA in the Senate and presumably on President Trump's desk. Still, what we heard and what Wolff's earlier reporting reveals is a deep animus by Epstein toward Trump, a bitterness, a resentment, at least by the date of those tape excerpts we played August 2017 and clearly thereafter. By 2019, after the media storm hit, Epstein was focused on image rehab. Within months, he would be charged with 2 serious felonies and would die, allegedly by suicide, in a New York prison. So many questions remain. Did the seemingly jocular man we heard on those tapes in 2019 take his own life months later, after his legal troubles mounted? Why was a so-called journalist, Michael Wolff, advising Epstein like a hired PR guru? And why wasn't his full role disclosed in his earlier books? Why was our friend Steve Bannon there? And what does he know of the Wolff tapes? More importantly, what about Bannon's own tapes? Bannon has publicly revealed that he at one point was making a documentary about Jeffrey Epstein. It's been reported he has 15 hours of his own tapes of this guy, but that they've never been released. They haven't been. Bannon once explained that he was hoping to show that Epstein's, quote, perversions and depravity toward young women were part of a life that was systematically supported, encouraged, and rewarded by a global establishment that dined off of his money and his influence. The New York Post even obtained a trailer for the film. Here it is.
By the time I was 16, I brought him up to 75 girls.
But he was glib, and he lived essentially like he was Gatsby. He was an absolutely terrifying person to encounter.
You own an island, right?
True. Thank you very much.
Two islands, the islands of Dr. Moreau.
Correct. I made my living from old thinking, but the future is for the way women think.
The way women think.
That's correct.
Is that not a sop because of all the depravity you've done against young women? And your new sop is that their women's thinking is the future?
No, I've always believed that women would be able to take over. I'm a firm believer and supporter of Time's Up. The greatest threat to people put in solitary confinement is they try to kill themselves. Imagine that. You're only in a room for 24 hours, you start to go crazy.
The monsters, Epstein's life among the global elite. Produced by somebody whose name I missed, and Steve Bannon. That film was never released. We reached out to Steve, who we love, for comment on our reporting, and we'll let you know when and if he responds. It's the one time of year that Birch Gold Group gives away free gold with every qualifying purchase. That's right, for Black Friday, when you convert an existing IRA or 401k in whole or in part into a tax-sheltered IRA in gold, Birch Gold will send free gold to your home for every $20,000 purchased. Gold started this year around $2,600 an ounce. By October, it was over $4,000 an ounce. Why? Global uncertainty. 2025 has been defined by trade wars. Central banks are pulling from the U.S. dollar as the global reserve currency, and military tension continues to build. Gold thrives in times of uncertainty, and if you are looking to diversify your savings, Birch Gold can help you. Plus, now through November 30th, get free gold with a qualifying purchase. Just text MK to the number 989898 to claim your eligibility and for our free info kit on gold. But your opportunity for free gold with purchase will end on November 30th. So don't wait. Text MK to the number 989898 for full details. Message and data rates may apply. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.